Hello, it's Tito from Jazz Mind. You know, there are two essential mindsets for any performing musician. They are the practice, or what I like to call the preparation mindset, and then the flow mindset. And we're going to go deeper today and talk about what they are and why they're so essential. I come from a classical background. So when I was preparing my junior and senior recitals, for example, I remember going through the preparation phase of preparing that material. And that involved listening to a ton of recordings of the repertoire. That means the tunes that I was playing. It involved working out all of the technical aspects of the piece, especially the really challenging parts, working on them slowly, isolating certain sections, and hopefully then putting it all together so that I would eventually be able to play right through those parts and they weren't going to be an obstacle anymore. All of these steps are part of the preparation or practice mindset. Now let's fast forward to when I would start working with my accompanist and we would start running the pieces. And sure, there's an aspect of the practice mindset there in that we could stop and fix things. But in general, at our rehearsals, we were trying to get to the point where we could play the piece from beginning to end without stopping. Hopefully capturing all of the decisions and phrase markings that I had put in, but sometimes mistakes would happen and you'd have to keep going because the objective was to play the piece in its entirety because that's what the objective is for the performance. This mindset is the flow mindset. Now let's break down these two mindsets a little deeper. The prep mindset is when your mind is focused on developing the tools and skills you need in order to be able to play a piece of music. It is a goal-oriented process where you use your conscious mind to focus on the nuts and bolts of music making. It's like saying, okay, my goal is to be able to play this piece, but in order to do that, I'm going to need to be able to do these certain things. This mindset involves a ton of repetition, correcting mistakes, and slow practice, all for the purpose of turning what is challenging and difficult into something easier, more comfortable, and repeatable. And especially as it pertains to those technical aspects of music making, the ultimate goal is to turn this all into muscle memory, where basically your body develops instincts. Or as Scott Reeves, author of Creative Jazz Improvisation, states, we want to turn them into trained musical instincts. What about the flow mindset? The flow mindset is the uninterrupted act of music making. And instead of being goal-oriented, it is process-oriented. You learn how to play in a flow state by doing it. This is the mindset we're in during live performances, where we let go of thinking, hopefully, about the small technical details associated with the prep mindset and enter the subconscious realm and into a flow of musical ideas and expression. Essentially, we allow the skills we developed in the practice room to enter into the subconscious muscle memory realm and just play music in the moment. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because I want to talk about the prep mindset and the flow mindset as it pertains specifically to jazz improvisation, because there are some distinct differences when you bring the element of improvisation into the equation. First off, let's take a look at what the prep mindset looks like as it pertains to developing as an improviser. When we practice jazz improvisation, there are specific things to focus on. Some of the more common ones are learning jazz harmony, like chord scale relationships, blues vocabulary, 2-5-1 approaches, applying harmony to the piano. You don't have to be a great piano player, but using the keyboard really gives musicians both a visual and an oral concept of the harmonic ideas that we're trying to practice and internalize. Transcribing your favorite solos by your favorite artists. Learning and memorizing tunes, jazz standards, jazz classics. And of course, practicing vocabulary in all 12 keys, and not only vocabulary, but practicing tunes in different keys as well. What about the flow mindset? As I stated earlier, the flow mindset presents some different challenges in jazz when we talk about improvisation. See, whereas in my classical approach, I knew what notes I was going to play. I did not write those notes. Those were written by a composer. In improvisation, you are both the performer and the composer, and it's a spontaneous composition, meaning you're literally making it up right on the spot. For the jazz musician, the flow mindset means you actually are going to let go. There is a letting go of what you were actually doing in the practice mindset. Now, we don't completely let go of what we practice in the practice room. The reason we use so much repetition and we slow things down as we learn our chords and scales and our vocabulary and get our language together is because we want to position ourselves to be able to utilize that information while we're in a flow state. But the reality is that information really needs to get to the subconscious level. I'm sure many of us can attest when you're working on something new in the practice room and then you actually try to play it at the jam session that night. Yeah, how does that go? Usually not very good. And even if you somehow miraculously get the lick out you were working on, then what? You see, you don't know that material well enough to be able to do something with it. Because it's still new, all you can do at that point is probably go on to something else. So even when it comes out, it more than likely is going to sound disjointed and kind of out of place. This is one of the more challenging aspects of teaching jazz improvisation, because I actually believe there are a whole lot of people that are not really used to being in a true flow state when they're improvising. It can be a scary proposition, especially if you come from a classical background like I did. There are a couple of quotes that I think describe the flow mindset in jazz that I want to share with you. The first one is from the legend Miles Davis. This quote comes from his autobiography. He says this: "Play what you know, but then play a little above what you know. Direct and to the point, just like Miles. Play what you know." So that means, what you're comfortable with, the language and the ideas that you use to negotiate these chord changes in this particular tune that you're improvising over. You're going to play what you know, but then you're going to challenge yourself to change it up a bit. When you're improvising, you don't want to play the same ideas the same way every time. That's going against the spirit of spontaneity that this music is really about. So what Miles is talking about is playing what you know, but not being tied to what you know all the time. Some of the ways this might bear out is maybe playing what you know, but changing the rhythm. Maybe adding notes to what you know. Maybe subtracting notes to what you know. If it's an ascending idea, play it backwards. We want to be able to say the same type of idea or play the same type of sound, but in many different ways. And when we can do that, now we are able to keep our listeners guessing because they can't predict exactly what we're going to play. The next quote I want to share with you is from the author of Effortless Mastery, the great jazz pianist Kenny Warner. And he said this: "I'm not interested in performing what I practice, but rather I'm interested in the effect practicing has on my performing." I love this quote. I feel it gets right to the heart of what it means to play and improvise in a flow state. In essence, when we practice for jazz improvisation, we're practicing a way that we might play. This is really important if you're practicing licks, for example. First of all, I think your licks should come directly from the source material of your favorite artists and not from a book. But let's talk about any licks, right? Is it wrong to learn licks or to play licks? Some people don't like to play licks. For me, it's not wrong to learn a lick. right? A little melodic fragment, a little melodic idea that you love how it sounds. You love the harmonic principles with it. It's got a swing. It's got a swagger to it. So we learn that, and we try to learn it in all 12 keys. But the purpose is not to go and improvise and play that lick the same way forever. No. Once you own the lick, once you can play it without making any mistakes, once it's easy for you, now you must take the next step of doing what Miles asked us to do, which is play what you know, but then play a little above what you know. We have to continue shaping those ideas, changing them, molding them, developing them until they actually start to become something else in the end. And that's precisely what Kenny Werner is talking about with his quote. He does practice certain devices and ideas, but the reason he inputs those ideas is to give himself some material to play with, to work with, to change up, to be creative with. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I don't have enough language or ideas to be even messing with a flow mindset right now. Wrong. Flow mindset must be practiced all along your development, even if all you can play is the blues scale right now. It's important that we practice getting into a flow state. Now, I will admit, when I was coming up, I would say the majority of my practice was spent in the practice mindset. But then I would turn on my favorite recordings and just improvise right along with them. So I could maybe glean some of the ideas that I was hearing. Of course, I could only do that over tunes that I knew. And then I would also play along with backing tracks, which is something that I'm not opposed to. But I'd try to solo through the entire backing track. Now, I will admit that when you play with backing tracks, sometimes my practice is kind of in between the practice mindset and the flow mindset, right? I practice a technique called restrictive practicing, which means, yeah, I'll be improvising, but I'm going to be improvising only on one idea or one topic, one general sound that I happen to be working on at the time. And so there is kind of a restriction. I'm not just totally letting go, but I'm trying to be as creative as I can with that idea and continue to change it up and develop it so that it does not stay the same. Many of my students ask me, hey, Tito, what are you thinking about then when you're in the flow mindset if you're not thinking about what you practice? It's a great question. First of all, if I don't know the melody and the chord changes of what I'm improvising over, it's going to be near impossible for me to get into any kind of flow. I have to have familiarity with the material on some level. But when I'm in a flow state, there's a few things that I'm always conscientious of. Number 1 and 1A are my sound and my rhythmic feel, my swing, right? To me, these two are the most important aspects of everything that I do. And it's what I teach my students that I want them to focus on, number 1 and 1A. I'm constantly listening to my sound, making sure it's an expressive sound. I'm playing with some dynamics. I'm playing with a beautiful, warm color to my tone. As far as the rhythmic side, I'm making sure that I'm riding on the beat that the rhythm section is providing, that I'm not going against what they're doing, but I'm constantly adding to this amazing swing groove that they're laying down. It's as much my responsibility as the trumpet player as it is the bass player or the drums to swing. And let me tell you something, when we're all locking in together and feeling that groove as one, nothing like it. The next thing I'm thinking about is I'm singing my solo in my mind while I'm playing. That's my goal. If you're not in the habit of singing your improvisations, then this is going to be a tough one for you. And it's one of the most beneficial ways of practicing that you could possibly do. Too often our practice room stuff is visually oriented, meaning we're stuck looking at the page. I was very fortunate that when I was 19, my jazz trumpet teacher, Willie Thomas, one of the first rules he laid out for me was get away from the written page as soon as you can. Not when you really know it, not when you have all of your most advanced ideas. No. Literally, after I can play the roots of the chord and arpeggiate the chords, get away from the page. Now, he was right. Why? Well, what I realized is that when I started getting away from the page is when I started developing my ear to hear the material that I was practicing. So if you've been practicing tunes and 2-5-1 licks and that type of thing, but then you try to sing and none of that stuff you're able to access, that's a clear sign that you're probably too visually oriented and that material is not transferring to your oral center. Do you realize we're actually using two different parts of our brains? Now, this is for some other video, but we have the critical thinking center, which is the prefrontal cortex, right? But then we have the temporal lobe. That's the auditory center. That's where we learned how to talk, right? You didn't learn how to talk from a book. I mean, your parents read to you, hopefully, but you learned how to talk by listening to your parents, and then you just started mimicking what they were saying. It was a completely auditory approach to learning. That's what this type of practice, this flow state practice, starts to tap into. So practice singing. Turn on the backing tracks and sing your solo. The more you do this, the more you'll be able to sing what's happening in your mind while you're actually soloing. Another thing I like to do is vary my phrase lengths. So when I'm in a flow state, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not falling into a predictable phrase pattern. I'm not playing all long phrases, for example, and I'm not playing all short phrases, but I'm playing short, long, and everything in between. I'm playing rhythmic phrases. I'm playing lyrical phrases. This gives variety to my solo, and it keeps my listeners guessing as to what might come next. And then the last thing I'll share with you today is I'm listening for ideas that I can develop. When I'm in a flow state, I know that I can already play the changes. By that point, the chord changes, I feel very comfortable. They're easy for me to negotiate. I've done the prep mindset work to prepare myself from a technical perspective to play the music. But in a flow mindset, I'm not making presuppositions of what's going to happen. No, I want to be ready for when inspiration strikes. So when that piano player plays maybe a different chord than I was anticipating, I want to try and be available to move along right with them. Or maybe the drummer throws in a specific hit, and that hit, I can take that hit and turn it into my own melodic idea if I'm truly in a flow state. I can't do that if I'm trying to premeditate what I'm going to play. No. What can you do to help you get more into a flow state when you're improvising? I have several thoughts, but I'm going to leave you with one now here towards the end of this video. And that is find other people to practice with, even if it's just one other person. Play a duet with that person where you're exchanging ideas by trading. Trading is one of the greatest ways to get outside of what you normally play and allow yourself to be inspired by what someone else is playing. And some of the most magical moments can happen just like that, spontaneously, where you both kind of have a dialogue and a conversation musically. So do your preparation mindset stuff, of course. Learn the melody, internalize the melody, get away from the page. Learn the chord changes. Be able to say out loud the chord changes as they're happening over the tune that you're playing, even if it's a blues. But then invite a friend to play that tune with you and start trading back and forth and exchange ideas. That's really going to help you stay in the moment, let go of your assumptions of what you're gonna play, and let it go and let it flow. I hope you enjoyed this video on Jazz Mind. If you did, smash that like button, please. And if you've gotten value from more than one of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. I'm really excited for what 2023 has in store, and I wish you all the best in the practice room and on the bandstand. Go find those opportunities both to perform, but also to practice with other people. Don't forget that this music is a communal music. We learn not just in the practice room. That's like half of it. We learn by playing with other people in live situations. Take care, family. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.